Hey guys, I'm Ethan Moore from Stockholm Supply. This past weekend was the Toronto Woodworking Show, and we were able to have Mike Davies from New Zealand come down and do a carving demonstration or a carving seminar at the show. So we filmed the seminar, and I'm going to post it on my YouTube channel here. Now, if you guys have watched my videos in the past, you know that I like making short, to the point videos. As much information as I can packed in a very short video. Now, this video is a lot longer. His seminar is about 40 minutes long, but there's nowhere I could really cut it to make it shorter. So if you have a chance, I encourage you guys to watch the whole video, especially if you are new to carving or just want to get your feet wet into carving. It's a great way to learn. So yeah, enjoy the video.
Well, hello everybody. My name's Mike. I'm from New Zealand, and this is sort of the middle of the night for me, so if I get a bit bleary-eyed or cut myself, then that's why. Alright, so we're going to look at carving, and I thought to begin with, I'll tell you a tiny little bit about my background and the education that we're about to see, and then we'll get straight into doing some demonstrations. We're going to do some 6 techniques, and then we're going to apply that to some simple designs that we can use for all sorts of different applications, and then we'll get on to sharpening, okay? So to begin with, what has happened there? So I'm really good with wood, but not technology. Let me just adjust that, sorry. Oh well, you can see it, you can see it. So I started carving at the age of 15. I left school, I had a real passion for wood and woodworking, but didn't really know what I was going to do. Was I going to go into joinery or building or furniture making? And purely by chance I met a guy who was a really well-known woodcarver. He trained in London. He had a great reputation, and he did lots of work for the royal family at home, the royals overseas, and he was looking for an apprentice. And so I was lucky enough to have a trial and managed to work with him for about 5 years. It was a 5-year apprenticeship. And I enjoyed it so much that I stayed another 3 years. So it was 8 years in total training. And during that time, we specialised in the restoration of carved antique furniture. And so here you can see, that's a mirror frame. You can see me with long hair. I thought I was very artistic. I used to stand in front of fans a lot, so my hair was like... That mirror frame there, in fact, is worth about £24,000. So what would happen is these antiques would come in cardboard boxes. Have you seen furniture from many years ago that was covered in gold leaf? You see in palaces, Versailles and places like that. Highly ornate stuff covered in gold leaf. Underneath that gold leaf is timber. It's carved timber. So our first job would be to have this big box of pieces. We would remove all of the gold leaf and lay it out and sort of work out what it is. So in this case it was a mirror frame, and then we would try to work out what's missing. Now the important thing with restoration is that we have to replicate the style from the period in time from which it was from, and we also have to replicate the style of the carver who created it. Because with restoration, you mustn't be able to see that it's been restored. And so my tutor, my boss's catchphrase for me was, Mike, perfection is only near enough. In other words, it needed to be absolutely spot on. And for the first 2 years that I trained, nothing that I produced was allowed out. So that was quite soul destroying, and needless to say, working 10 hours a day for pretty much 6 days a week, turning stuff into firewood. I didn't get paid very much, but I loved the work. So during that time, I also trained as a furniture maker, so I learned how to make furniture and also teach. I went and studied teaching, so I could teach adults. And I used to spend a fair bit of time wandering around furniture making colleges, specialising in teaching traditional hand skills. And also around that time, I was asked by a magazine if I could come up with a series to try and teach people how to carve. Now the difficulty of teaching someone how to learn to carve is there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different shapes and sizes of carving tools. Not only do they vary in the profile, but they also vary in the shape of the shank. So for someone who's starting out, what do you buy? You know, what tools are you going to buy? And then there's an infinite amount of projects that you can carve. So it's really tricky to know where to start. And in fairness, a lot of tool manufacturers, they'll put together beginner sets, but they put all these weird and wonderful shapes in that look good, and you think, oh yeah, that's going to work, but you rarely use these back bends and spoon bends. They're very specialist tools. So we thought, okay, let's really restrict it. We'll put 5 tools together. That's 4, 5, yeah, I'm probably not tired. 5 tools together, number the tools, focus on 6 techniques, and then have a range of projects that are graded in difficulty, where we could say, use this technique, tool number 2, and hold it in this position, and work step by step through a project. So that really the focus was just learning the foundation skills. And so carving by numbers was born, and at that point we had it published into a book. So my relationship with Record Power then started. Record is a very historic English toolmaker, and they were known around the world for producing top quality tools. They had a lovely range of carving tools, but it didn't fit the education. So they redesigned the profile, so now it fits the education, and we've ended up with a set of 12 tools. The education was put on a DVD, so you can physically watch the technique as we teach it, and all of the projects that were in the book we now give away free, and we're going to give you those projects at the end of the seminar. So the 15 projects that's part of the book is yours, that's free, and if you are interested in the set of carving tools, they're usually $189, they're $169 for the show. So 12 tools, DVD, 15 projects, $169. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, we've talked about my background, the education, and the tools. Now I'm going to see if I can turn this over to the camera, and there we will start to do some demonstration. Is that going to work? Is that going to work? It's going to work. All right. Okay, so when we're learning to carve, there are 2 very distinct areas of learning. 2 distinct areas. The first is the technical skill, it's the foundation skills. It's how to hold the tools correctly, how to sharpen. And that's the bit that we're really going to focus on, because it doesn't matter what subject you're going to carve. If you're going to carve spoons, or a duck, or the human form, or architectural carving, it doesn't matter. You still need to know those foundation skills. So all of the projects that we give to you, it's not about learning how to carve a flower, it's about drumming in that technique. So let's talk about the technique now. There are 6 techniques that I'm going to show you. 2 is how to hold the tools correctly. 2 techniques is how to motivate that tool through the timber. 1 technique is about safety, and the 6th one is a surprise. I'm not going to tell you what that is just yet. So let's do how to hold the tool properly. The first technique, pinch position. Now this might sound really obvious and basic, but knowing how to hold the tool properly is actually a really good start. So pinch position between your finger and your thumb, and it doesn't matter if you're left or right-handed. Just hold the tool in whichever hand you feel most comfortable. My dominant hand is right, so it kind of feels natural to hold that in my left hand. Now we're going to use that position for setting in a vertical cut. So I'm going to work here. Can you see that on the TV? Setting in a vertical cut or cutting towards it. But the focus here isn't on what I'm cutting, it's how I'm holding the tool. Pinch position. The second technique will say fist position, and it's simply grabbing hold of the tool with a firmer grip. The sharp end, the cutting end, is next to my little finger. So not like that, next to my little finger. And all that's going to do is allow me to have a better grip. So that's the two ways to hold the tool. That's it. Now let's talk about the safety bit. The general rule here, so this is, you can say technique number 3, the general rule here is the hand that is holding the tool, or the arm of the hand holding the tool, must always be in contact with either the timber or the workbench. Because if I'm not in contact with anything and I'm just hovering above the work, you can see very easily that I can slip. But as soon as that hand is in contact with the timber, I've got an anchor. So it means that if I'm doing the pinch position setting in, it's anchored. If I am motivating the tool through the timber, I can stop at any point because I've got an anchor. So we've got pinch position, fist position, and it always must be anchored. Now, a golden rule is, if we ever need to use more than gentle arm weight to push that tool through the timber, and so, look, with a nice sharp tool, this is not a lot of weight, and I can remove timber quite nicely, right? It's not a lot of weight. If I need to really move some timber, then what I don't want to do is put body weight behind the tool, because that could lead to me slipping. So at that point, that's where we're going to use a mallet. Fist position, anchored. Now watch what happens. Can you see there? Watch what happens as I tap the handle with a mallet. Can you see the cutting edge is motivated forward, but it's returning back to its original position? And this is the beauty of carving tools that are full size. We can get palm tools, but you can't use a mallet. Well, it's difficult. So can you see how that's being motivated forward? Now, because I'm anchored, all I've got to do is increase the angle, and now I'm cutting timber. See? Under control. Pinch position, fist position, it's always anchored. If I want to move some timber, tapping technique. Now, for polished cuts, let's think about going to a bakery and you're going to buy a really fresh loaf of bread, and you've got the sharpest knife that you can find. If you just push down on top of that loaf of bread, what's going to happen? It'll crush. As soon as you slide the knife, the cut becomes effective. So the same principle applies with a carving tool. And if we watch here, if I want to do a nice polished cut, see how I slide the tool through the timber. You see that? I'm using the entire length of the steel of the tool. And I don't know whether you can see that lovely little shaving that was coming off there. You see that? So that's pinch position, fist position, it's anchored. Tapping technique to move timber, sliding for a polished cut, and that is it. That's 5 techniques. The 6th one is the challenging one, because those 5 techniques now we're using our dominant hand, our left hand. The rule is, if we're going to carve to the left hand side of the bench, we hold the tool in our left hand. Carve to the left side of the bench. If I want to carve to the right side of the bench, well, this is going to get tricky. So we hold the carving tool in our right hand. And so all of those 5 techniques we're going to duplicate with both hands. So I want to carve to the right, hold it in the right hand, carve to the left, hold it in the left hand. It feels a little odd at first, but soon you just won't think about it. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the plans that we give you are circular. Because what that's encouraging you to do is to practice those techniques in all directions without moving yourself or the work. I mean, you end up with some nice little projects, but the point is that they're practice pieces. So with that now said, what I'll do is show you some how we apply those techniques to some nice little designs like this. So in the plans that we send to you, it's a PDF document, download it, print it off, stick the piece of paper, the design, on top of your timber, just like I've done with that flower. This is called flat carving, and all we would do is set in with vertical cuts to follow the line of the design. So I won't stick it down because I want you to see what I'm doing, but imagine I've got my design here, and the appropriate shape of the tool, pinch position it's anchored, see that? Yep. Setting in a vertical cut. Now, it's important here that the inside of the canal of the tool, so we call that the canal of the tool, the inside of that is 90 degrees to the surface of the timber. And the reason for that is as I'm setting in the design, if I'm coming in at an angle, well, if I remove the surface of the timber, the design is going to get smaller. If I come out at an angle like that, the design gets bigger. So we want to try and keep it at 90 degrees to the timber surface. So here we go. I'm going to set in that cut. Imagine that's following the line of a design. And now, we're just to bring that into relief, it's in the fist position. Look how quick and easy that is. So we've set in a line, we've cut towards it, and that is all that's required for a design like that. Very quick. And that, I mean, imagine that set in the lid of a box. Or if you put little coat hooks on there, that could be a coat hanger. Or you could use it on the front of a fireplace. There's no end of applications that you could use that for. Who's heard of, Celtic artwork? And Celtic artwork is the combination of interwoven bands. Well, if you Google Celtic artwork, you will get hundreds and hundreds of different designs, which you can then enlarge, print off, stick onto your timber, and do exactly that same process. The difference there, though, is that because it's interwoven, we've got to add some 3 dimension. So if I put that to the camera, you see that there? Now imagine this is flat carving, and that's perfectly okay. But imagine if I set in a line there, and set in a line there, and then I shape that band down, and I shape that band down, it's going to look like it's passing underneath the other one. And this is quite easy and again quick to do, but it's important why we keep that cut vertical, because now if I'm shaping that down, I want a consistent width of band. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's really nice and easy. Lettering. Again, sign writing years ago was a very a complicated skill. It was a craft, a trade all by itself. You'd have to know all the different fonts. It had to be hand drawn on. You'd have to know how to space the letters accurately, how to space the words and the lines. Of course, the computer does that for us now, doesn't it? We can pick what size of font you want, it italic, bold, and again, print it off, stick it on top of your timber, either with masking tape like I've done here, or a print stick, and carve through. So I'll show you. There's a bit of a difference here, and this is why it's important to use 2 hands. So, letters are formed by a V. So, with lettering, now let's say I'm doing a straight line. I would hold that tool at 45 degrees. I'm setting in a cut, opposite hand because I'm carving to the right. Cut towards it. So now I'm forming a V. The general rule is the wider the line, the deeper the cut, the narrower the line, the shallower the cut. And that gives you some nice highs and lows. And it's actually really quite quick. If it's a curve, then again you can use the various profiles of your toolkit to, I'll use this one, to follow that at 45 degrees on that angle. And then we'd use the tip of the tool to follow the line at 45 degrees in that angle, again forming a V. Just remember for a moment that just remember those projects, because the tip of the carving tool is really, really important. And when we come to sharpening, I'll explain why. Because you need to keep that intact. When you're sharpening, it's very easy to round that over. So what we want to be able to do is keep that intact, and I'll show you a bit later. There's a lot of little practice designs that we can do. that also form quite interesting patterns. So I'll show you how to do this, this and flutes now. So for a little design like we just saw, it's a setting cut and now using a gouge to cut towards it. Nice and easy. So if we do a row of those, we get a design similar to that. Have you heard of flutes? Flutes are, you know, down a table leg, for example, you get flutes. Or across the frieze of a fireplace, you might see designs like that. You could say, well, I could do that on a router, and you could do that hollow shape, but it's very difficult with a router to get this lovely foot, this crisp, clean foot. And it's a great way to practice those skills. So, for example, we're going to set in that cut. You see that? Fist position, and I'm just sliding. Now, because I'm anchored, the last thing I want to do is break through and take out that foot, but because I'm anchored, it's only gentle arm weight, I've got control. And see how by using the top of the tool, I can actually carve a nice straight line on the surface of the timber. See that? So that's really what defines the cleanness of that flute. You see that nice straight line there? And then down the opposite side. Nice and clean. So just like the flute, the cleanness of the flute is defined by how straight that line is on the surface. Same rule applies to the lettering. The thing that really makes lettering nice and clean is the cleanness of the line on the surface of the timber and the cleanness of the line in the valley. So that's where those nice controlled hand skills are important. So let's take a look at this little flower now. Now I'm not going to carve the whole flower, but I'll show you how we can add 3 dimension, but also the importance of being again able to use those techniques and use both hands. So I'm going to carve this little quadrant here, and I'm going to carve that quadrant there, because that's, and the rest is just repetition. Now what I could do is I could have a perfectly clean circle like a dish around there. So I could get a compass, I could draw a perfect circle, and just like we did with the flute, we could have a perfect circular line on the surface of the timber. Or, depending on the style, it could be just rough in a random sort of pattern and leave the tool marks in. So it's just down to the style that you want to choose. I'm going to leave the tool marks in. Now I've already set in the profile of this flower through the paper. So now I can remove this. And remember, when we're setting in, we keep in the canal of the tool at 90 degrees to the timber surface. So can you see now how I've set that through? So again, understanding the importance of keeping those tips intact, I can now use that edge of the carving tool to start removing the background and bringing this little flower into relief. Now some people might say, what's a good wood to carve? Of course, that's a really important question. So the general rule there with the type of timber that you're going to carve is timbers that are light in weight with a straight, close grain. So it's close grain and straight, light in weight. Generally that's going to be far easier to carve than a timber that's heavy and dense with wild grain. But that's not always the general rule, because walnut is a hardwood. It's got really crazy grain, but that carves like butter. You get a nice piece of walnut, it is beautiful. So it's not always the rule of thumb. The thing to do is to, if you've got a good relationship with your timber supplier, is to just take a nice sharp carving tool into the store and ask, can you actually just cut a little bit off the edge? Because you might find a timber carves, you might say, oh, this basswood carves beautiful. Basswood's the timber for me. But if that basswood, for example, has not been stored well, or it's too dry, it might be crumbly. So it's not, you might have a great experience with one board, but the next might not be very good. So the knack really is just to ask if you can take a little slice out of it and try it. But common timber, so now that's the left side, so I've used my left hand. I'm just going to do the same here, just so as you can see how we're applying those same techniques, but with both hands. So this is what I'm carving here is basswood. In the UK and Europe, it was very common to carve in a timber called lime. So a lot of those carvings that you just saw on the, with the antique restoration, that was either pine or lime. In New Zealand and Australia, kauri is a beautiful timber to use. And in actual fact, there's an Indonesian, I think it's Indonesian, it's called gelatong. Now gelatong, a lot of pattern makers use gelatong. It's incredibly stable, and generally I haven't really come across a bad piece yet. So most common timbers to practice with, basswood, gelatong, lime. Pine, actually, is a good timber to try, because it doesn't carve very nicely across the grain. So it's really got to make you practice sliding the tool. So one of the things that we always want to try and do as you're carving is make sure that you don't leave any ragged edges behind. Make sure that all of your cuts are nice and clean. We don't want to leave a mess, because all of a sudden the carving can start to look very messy. So that would just be a repetition right the way around. I'm going to set in the profile now of this petal, so you can see how we would shape the petal. And then we'll put a little detail in there to show you. So the point of all of this is that I'm not using any other technique than those 6 that I showed you. Just going to set this in a little detail there. Okay? So it's just a repetition. Let's talk about the height of your bench. This is actually a little bit low for me, probably, because when you're carving, it's pretty important not to be bending and hurting your back. So it would be ideal when you're standing nice and tall to have the work piece the same height as your elbow. So you'd be standing and working in this position. It's okay to sit down if you need to, but I often find that if you're standing, it's a little bit easier, you're a bit more versatile to get around. So we've talked about 6 techniques. We've looked at a range of projects. Again, the design is to help drum in the skills. We've talked about timber. Is there any questions at this point before I move on to sharpening? Oh, right. So, sharpening. When you get these tools, they're nice and sharp straight out the box. And what we'll do is we'll work backwards. So rather than going grinding, honing, stropping, we'll just talk about the maintenance of tools that are already pretty sharp. So, one of the important things is to understand the composition of steel. So whatever we're going to do to maintain it, we don't want to introduce heat into it. Grinding can be really detrimental to the quality of the steel. When these tools are manufactured, they're carbon steel. When they're manufactured, they're stamped into shape, and then they're heated to cherry red. So they're heated to the beautiful cherry red colour, dipped in water, which is called quenching. And what that does is it makes the steel incredibly hard but brittle. So when we've got these lovely little sharp tips, these sharp edges, if I was to push down on that sharp tip in that primary state, it would either break or bent. So to make that durable, it's heated again to sort of straw colour. You see all these brown tones coming through the steel, and then it's quenched, it's dipped in oil. So that process is called tempering, and it makes it hard and durable. The problem is if we're sharpening a tool and introducing heat, so particularly on a high-speed grinder, which is rotating at 3,000 RPM, when you get to that really fine little point, it gets hot very quickly. And if you allow it to burn or get hot, it goes back to its primary state. It becomes hard and brittle because you've just heated it up again and now it's brittle. So whatever method of sharpening you use, you've got to make sure that we don't get the steel hot. So coming back to them, they're sharp, they're out the box, just to maintain that edge. Do you know, like a barber's strop? You know, they have the cutthroat razors and they would strop it on a piece of leather. Well, that's perfect for maintaining the edge of your carving tool. You can use the back of your belt, because on the back side of a leather belt, you've got that sort of suede type finish, and you can put this abrasive soap into there, and you could see how then you would draw the carving tool down the length of that leather with the abrasive compound in, give it a lovely polished finish. There's a high-speed option. Now this is something that stockrooms supply. They supply the motor and the felt wheel. And I'm just going to turn that on. So this is a high-speed strop. So this is the abrasive soap. And if I offer the tool to that is polishing that steel without introducing heat. And that will be like a razor now, so that is seriously quick and seriously sharp. What's very, very important though, is we must make sure that this wheel is travelling away from the steel. You would not want to introduce that steel if that belt wheel is travelling towards you. That would be a complete disaster. So you've got to make sure that the wheel is travelling away from you when you introduce the steel to it. So that's stropping, that's making sure you've got a lovely polished edge. But let's just say, and that glides through the timber. Let's say we've got a little defect in the tip of that. You're going to see it in the timber. Imagine if you've got a little nick, it's going to leave a drag mark, a white line through the timber. So if you can't get rid of it, if you can't remove it, it's too deep, and you can't get rid of it on a strop or on your leather, then we need to hone it on a stone. Now there's lots of different types of stone. You can get silicon carbide. This is something which is relatively inexpensive. I've had this, and going back to my apprenticeship, saying that 2 years, everything I produced was pretty much out the door. I didn't have a lot of money to spend on a stone. This was quite inexpensive, but it's lasted for 35 years. Big birthday this year. The one thing that we have to be conscious of is whatever stone we're going to use, we're probably going to damage it, because when I use it with a carving tool, with a gouge, I'm going to go across the stone and I'm going to create a dish defect in there.
Attention, Kyle Boudreau from Cookstown, Ontario. Can you please come to the show office? Kyle Boudreau of Cookstown, Ontario. You're a winner.
Well, hey. So the silicon carbide, the ceramic stones, there is a natural stone called an Arkansas stone. There are some beautiful bits of kit. I think just round the back of Stockroom Supply, these are diamond cutting stones. You can't damage these. So even if we're going horizontally across, it's not going to create a dish in these. But whatever stone you use, it's the same technique, and that's the bit that I will show you now. So, the average angle of a carving tool is anywhere between 20 and 30 degrees, and the angle really relates to the application. So, if I was going to do lettering or very delicate work in soft timber, I'd probably go for a keen angle, about 20 degrees. If I'm using a mallet and I'm knocking large quantities of timber of hard wood, I would probably go for a greater angle because I'm not going to damage it so easy. Whichever angle you go for, we need to put an edge on. Now, who's heard of a micro bevel? Well, hey, right. So, when we were always taught, sharpen a tool, there's your bevel, put a micro bevel on, slightly greater angle. It's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is every time you sharpen, you have to increase the angle, and eventually that's going to round the bevel over, which means you've got to regrind it to get a nice flat angled bevel. So if you're going to put a micro bevel on there, make it really micro. We don't want to, if you've got a 20-degree angle, all of a sudden you don't want to put a 30-degree bevel on it because it's going to round it over. So I feel here, can you see? Yep. So here I can feel the bevel, and it's just a minute lift. My elbow is locked into my side, and I'm just rotating that steel like that. Not quite there. There we go. So what I was looking for when it tells me that I'm just on the edge and I've put a new edge on there is I've created a fine wire, a burr, on the inside of the canal of the tool. So if you just run your finger up it, not down, because it's sharp now, run it up, and you feel that slight little wire burr, yeah? Got it? Feel that? So what I need to do, now that's told me, I should be able to feel that right consistently along that cutting edge. So it's told me that I've got a nice consistent sharp edge right the way around the contour of the gouge. But now I've got to remove that, and you can get lots of different shapes of stones. These are called slip stones. Usually you would use a finer grade than the bench stone. And with the diamond cutting system, just around the back of Stockroom's banner there, they also do shaped little files too, down to about 1,000 grit, and probably beyond. Now the idea here is I'm just going to remove the burr from the inside of the gouge. However, I don't want to create a bevel on the inside. There's nothing wrong with it. Some carvers will say, no, you're supposed to create a bevel on the inside. It's the style of carving that you do. I just choose not to. And the reason for that is because you see some of this work here where I'm setting in a vertical cut, and the definition of the design is all about what's on the surface. If I've got a bevel on the inside, I'm going to start to slightly round over the edges of that design. So I like to keep the inside of the canal of the tool absolutely flat. So what that means then is I'm simply removing that burr, and once that's gone, I might use a finer bench stone and do the process again. Or if you've got something like this power strop, which is fantastic, I would just go straight onto that, and it's going to be like a razor. Now if I've dropped it and I've really damaged the edge and I can't even get an edge off the bench stone, then I've got to regrind it. So going back to that statement about making sure we don't overheat the steel, if you use a high-speed grinder and you pass and you're putting a new bevel on, after each pass, dip it in water. After each pass, dip it in water. High-speed grinders, Ethan, what are they, 3,400 RPM? So that's really fast. You could get a slow-speed grinder, which is about 1725, right? But one of the best grinders for sharpening your tools is actually a whetstone sharpener. Now all of those are totally okay, it's perfectly okay, but you've just got to make sure that you're not allowing the steel to heat up. A whetstone sharpening system is travelling around at about 90 RPM. It's carrying water to the steel, so there's no way that it can overheat. And a lot of those systems have some really nice jigs, and those jigs make sure, even for gouges and difficult tools to sharpen, make sure that you keep an absolutely consistent bevel, because what you don't really want is lots of different angles all the way around the tool. So for grinding, my recommendation really is a whetstone sharpening system. If you're using a grinder, use a low-speed grinder. Dip after each pass. High-speed grinder, definitely dip in water after each pass. So is there any questions on sharpening? I must have done good. No questions. Alright, so to summarise all of that, we have a set of 12 tools. It comes with a DVD. There's 15 free projects for you anyway. A set of tools, $169. But on your seat is a brochure. And if you sat on it, it'll be nice and warm now. And on the front page of your brochure, you'll see there's a QR code. And that's going to take you, it's a little square box with dots on it. On the inside front cover, sorry. So that little square box at the bottom. So you can either hover your phone over that, and it's going to take you to Stockroom Supply's website, where you'll see the list of 15 projects, the entire contents of that book, and you can download that for free. And inside there, let's show you just very quickly. If you wanted to carve that Tudor rose, for example, it will give you the history of the design, the War of the Roses, the Lancastrians and the Yorkists. You know, there's a whole story behind that design. It tells you the tool reference number to use. It takes you step by step through each process, telling you the technique and the number of tool, and it gives you the plan as well. So all of that's available for you free. And if you want to take advantage of the carving tool set, as I say, usually $189, $169 today. Well, thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, you can come up and see me. If you want to have a go, you can come and have a go with the carving tools. And thank you. Cheers.